Hey, what's happening, YouTube? Episode 12, Coffee Talk with Haze. This morning I want to leave off. I want to pick up where I left off from the last episode and pick up on the concerts that I don't have the concert ticket stubs for anymore. A lot of my favorite shows out of this lot, and I'm probably never going to remember all the shows that I went to, let alone remembering what happened at some of the shows that I even went to. So I'm going to try to do this chronologically, and we'll see how it goes. So the first show that I ever attended, you may not believe this, but it was Eagles in 1979, and it was the second leg of the Hotel California tour. I did not know what was really going on. Some of my aunts took me with them, so they were my chaperone in a sense. They went and just made sure that I was safe, and I enjoyed the show, I guess. I kind of remember a few things. I was definitely confused about a lot of stuff. You know, looking back, I now know that when Glenn Frey introduced Timothy Schmidt and they sang New Kid in Town, it was just one of those things where they decided, oh, he's the new player, so we're going to play this song. And I thought that Glenn Frey was the new kid in town, because that's what a kid doesn't understand when you see this stuff and you're like, I don't know who these people are and I'm confused. And so for the longest time, I thought that Glenn Frey was like a later addition to the Eagles. Rest in peace, Glenn Frey. So yeah, if you don't know the Eagles, you're not going to get that, but yeah. He was the main songwriter. And of course, Don Henley, you know. So I do remember like a drum solo, and I remember seeing, and maybe getting this mixed up with the next concert, but I'm pretty sure it was Eagles. And I remember seeing like a drum solo, and I remember seeing just hands and sticks hitting on the drum and shadows on the ceiling from the lighting. Now this was at Murphy Center here at MTSU, again, 1979. The next year at the same venue, I saw Jackson Browne, and I was actually a big Jackson Browne fan for some reason. That album that came out that year with Running on Empty, you know, that was one of my first albums that I actually had, that I purchased. And some Styx stuff, and some early crazy obscure Pink Floyd. Those are my first albums, but that's maybe another episode for another day, if I could even remember what albums I had as a kid. But Jackson Browne was my second concert that I remember going to. That was 1980, again at Murphy Center at MTSU, here in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Then after that, starts to get a bit hazy. I'm pretty sure it was Billy Joel in 1984 on his Innocent Man tour, and that was pretty awesome. I would have liked to have seen him earlier in the day, but again, I was way too young to understand anything. Lucky to have seen Eagles and nothing else. So after Billy Joel, same place, MTSU, Murphy Center. Then after that, I saw Tina Turner. Now, hang on, let me back up. I already told you about Billy Joel, I think, because that was when Huey Lewis and the News opened for him, I do believe. But again, nope. I'm getting all that mixed up. Sorry. So moving forward, Tina Turner in 1985, and Mr. opened up for them. Here's the funny part. And I was not a Mr. fan until I saw them live, and I was instantly sold. They were a real band, and I had no idea how amazing their drummer, Pat Mastelotto, was at the time. Just knew that there was something going on there. And yeah, Mr. is actually one of my favorite bands, although there's not really a whole lot in their catalog, and for that matter, I really kind of reserve that just to the first album. So for me, they're kind of one of those one-hit wonder, one-hit album kind of bands. They had a couple more albums, and I'm sure there's some songs that I should try to, you know, revisit one of these days, but After that was that first Rush show that I saw at Municipal in 1987. And then after that, didn't really see anybody. There was a lot of shows that I wish that I could have seen during the 80s that I missed out on. There was Ozzy Osbourne with Motley Crue. There was when Van Halen had their 1984 tour. Missed out on that one as well. My goodness gracious, there was so much good stuff that I missed out on. There was U2 when they came to Murphy Center for their Unforgettable Fire tour, I believe it was, or what was after that. I gotta have this stuff written down. It's not Unforgettable Fire, it was the one after that one with Pride. No, whatever. Moving on. So then after that, I saw Rush again on their Presto tour. and that was in Greenville, South Carolina. And some friends of mine and I traveled from this location to go see that show, and it was a long road trip. We got there, Mr. Big opened for them, and that was kind of strange, but it was okay. At one point I remember seeing some band, and I saw Tommy Shaw, and I want to say it was Rush, and I want to say it was that show, but no, that was when I saw Mr. Big open for Rush, and I don't remember when I saw Tommy Shaw, but Tommy Shaw was actually pretty cool. I was at least able to see Tommy Shaw. I was a huge Styx fan as a child, so that was pretty cool. I mean, I was more into kind of Dynasty Young at that time because I was more into keyboards than guitar and singing, but no, I'm actually much happier that I saw Tommy Shaw play live. So now let me take a sip of coffee and try to refresh the brain and remember what shows I saw for that, because here's where it gets kind of weird. Because after I saw Rush in 1991, that's when I moved to Knoxville, and I switched schools, and I started focusing more on playing drums. I started focusing more on being a musician, on wanting to be on stage instead of watching from the other side. So I was watching at that point, like seeing like a whole lot of local bands at like crud clubs, at all kinds of places, all over Knoxville. And when I came back to Murfreesboro from Knoxville, the scene opened up here in mass immensely as well. So I saw like just so many local bands that it gets kind of crazy. One of those was Mike Watt. I'm jumping forward a bit. Like this was sometime in the mid-late 80s. And let me back up, excuse me. It was supposed to be Mike Watt, but he had his infamous bout with near bout with death, where I can't remember, like they removed his gallbladder, I believe, and that was the show where that happened, and he was not there. He was in the hospital, and I got to see Stephen Perkins, the drummer from Jane's Addiction, play in the spot where I played with so many bands so many times. And oh my God, Stephen was so incredibly loud. I mean, he was just like, well, this is as loud as I play on tour. I don't care how small the venue is, I'm going to crush it. And he crushed it. Oh my God. So that was interesting. Unfortunately, Mike Watt wasn't there for that, but that was like really cool. But let's see. So after that Rush show in Greenville, South Carolina, that's kind of a tongue twister. Moving forward, it was that's when I saw Megadeth in Knoxville. I wasn't going to see a whole lot of shows back then. It was a crazy time. And so just like that Meshuggah show, Megadeth show that I saw in Knoxville in like 1991 or whenever it was, same kind of situation, but inverse. So the friend of mine who sold me his ticket because he had a stomach virus and couldn't go to the show, his other friend couldn't go to this show, so I went with him to go see Pantera in 1995. And Typo Negative opened for them. Not a huge fan of them. They were good. They were a tight band, of course, as you can expect with anybody who's going to be on that circuit touring. Pantera blew me away. I had no idea how good that they really were. Now, looking back at all of this stuff, I start to question all of these bands. Alice in Chains at Lollapalooza including. Was there somebody backstage playing guitar, rhythm guitar, over to keep things thick? Because I kept saying to myself, how are these bands sounding so good, sounding just like the record? And there's only 4 of them on stage. If there was one more person on stage, I wouldn't question. See, it's not that I doubted their ability to play. It's just that, you need another instrument up there to carry another layer to kind of like fill up the gap when you've got only one guitar player switching between rhythm and soloing. So, I don't know, but it was wild. When I was watching Alice in Chains, I was paying attention, and I really didn't even hear that layer. You know what I'm saying? It was like, wow. So anytime you hear a studio recording of this stuff, they're going to double up the guitars, triple them, quadruple them, add a whole bunch of stacking and so forth, just to get like a really thick sound, and then it becomes a bit of an issue to recreate that live. A lot of bands can do it, a lot of bands can't do it. It's a lot in both cases, then maybe it should only be a few on one, but I don't know. So, okay, yeah. One of the shows that I skipped over, was I think in 1993 or 94. That's right, 1994. I saw Fish again, and this was the best Fish show that I saw of the 3 Fish shows that I saw. So So I saw them in 93, 94, and 95, I believe. 93 was the time at Starwood. 94 was at Municipal Auditorium in Nashville, Tennessee. And this show was just one of the best shows I've ever seen, period. This is when they had their lighting person that was kind of the sixth member of the band. However, like fifth member, whatever. Yeah, there's four. So the fifth member of the band. And he knew the songs. He not only knew the songs, he knew where the band members were going with their improvisation. Hey, maybe it was all calculated every time. They kind of played the same thing every show. I don't know. I haven't really done my homework on that one. I do know that Phish was very notorious, more so back in those days, of getting a sort of a polyrhythm on top of the main 4/4, and they would all join into it to where that they were all hitting that polyrhythm until and just keep going over the bar, keep going with it, until they felt that the audience was sufficiently lost, and then they would just come right back in, right on, not just any one, but the 1/1 where everything lined back up so that they can go back into the 4/4 groove that they had originally established. And the lighting guy would be able to follow them doing that. So it was very effective, like at one point when they were just kind of going, and all four of them in their microphones and speeding up, and the lights were spinning up off the monitor wedges, coming like over across the top of them, up across the audience, and going as fast as they were. Just incredible stuff. I mean, I'm sure that there has to be some of these shows that were captured somewhere on YouTube. Maybe not. The mid-90s, there was not a whole lot of recording going on. A lot of this was like, no cameras. You can't record this stuff. No way. Everybody was so fearful of losing or leaving any money on the table whatsoever. They still are. Okay, so that was a really, really great show. That was a great show. Another great show around the same year was Primus, and this was a crazy show for me. This is one of the good ones. I'm gonna have to spend a little bit of time on that one. Can't remember how I got the tickets. I wound up with 3 tickets. I want to say that Sam was responsible for me for having these other tickets. Like, he couldn't go to the show, and I was left with 2 extra tickets. Now you're asking, well, who is Sam? Well, you should meet Sam. He's a pretty cool guy. And even though he left me with these tickets, and even if he's not the right person who did this, and he's not around to contest, so we'll just say it was Sam's fault, I end up getting a couple other people to go to the show with me. One was a person who notoriously did not have a car. At the time, for whatever reason, I didn't have a ride. I think my ride was broken down. So here I am with tickets and no way to get to the show. And so I got convinced one of my roommates in the place that I was living at, one of my neighbors, it was a broken down house into some apartments, one of my neighbors to go to the show. This person's name was Bubba. I think that was his birth name. Now, Bubba was not a Primus fan. It's not that he was not a Primus fan. I don't think he really had heard anything. If I was going to play him something, I would probably want to play him one known as Big Brown Beaver, because that's kind of a country kind of sound song. So here we are. Bubba's, going to the show. He's got an ulterior motive, though. He's going to go to Connections. Like, we're going to go to the concert and everything, but he's like, well, we'll hang out here for a while, and if there's not any women here, then I'm going to go to this bar down the road from the arena, not just like a few blocks and down the road and down another road a few blocks and down that road a few blocks and around the corner. This place called Connections, which is a notorious meat market. They had disco nights and just dance and drink cheap, fruity drinks and get really drunk and hook up with people. You see the dichotomy here between people wanting to go see a Primus show and people wanting to go to a place like that, okay? So here we are at the Primus show, and it was wild because there was not a whole lot of people. This was, it was the album that they had, it was Frizzle Fry, Pork Soda, that's it. It was the Pork Soda tour. And there was not a whole lot of people at the show. Maybe because it was Nashville, Tennessee, and it was 1994, and it just wasn't, Nashville just wasn't hip at that point. Nashville became hip, oddly enough, after 1995. Like in the late 90s, early 2000s, Nashville had like a really interesting underground alternative scene. It really was really cool to be part of that. Really, really cool. I don't think any of it was really documented either. Maybe I can find some of these bands and talk about them someday. But, so back to the Primus show. What I'm trying to get you to envision is, like with your typical arena, like nobody was up in the bleachers. Everybody was down on the floor, but it was only like a small kind of gathering up towards the stage. Like you could see like here's the arena people, and you could see the engineer's sound booth, you know. It was really easy to just kind of hang around that area. It was really casual. But there was a mosh pit. And it was a ravenous mosh pit. Wow. So, you know, we're just kind of hanging out the show, just being casual. And then Bubba's getting bored. And he's my ride home. So I'm trying to procure, you know, make sure, okay, I don't want to get stuck in Nashville, in downtown Nashville. Like, even like back then, I really didn't even know Nashville very well. Like even now, I wouldn't want to be stuck in downtown Nashville trying to get back to Murfreesboro. So he's bored. He mentions something about, hey, let's go up front. So yeah, let's go. Yeah, let's go to the front stage. I never go to the front stage. I'm the kind of person like I never hit front stage. It's risky, and maybe I should be more of a risk taker in that instance, but. By the end of this, I hope that I'll remember when I'm going to get to my point of this whole thing. And that's, you know, me being front stage is not a priority. So in this one instance, I went front stage here at the Primus show. So I walked Bubba, you know, around the left side. You know, we couldn't see the mosh pit. You kind of could really. You know, we went around. Let me back up. No. He led me. Yeah, I forgot all about that. He was a total jerk. I can't believe this is important. This is very, very important. He was a total jerk. He was like, hey, let's go hit the front. So he just marched down. Luckily, we were on the left side. And I remember he went kind of straight down. We were on the left side. We avoided the mosh pit. And he's just bumping his way past everybody. And I'm like, as he's making an area right behind him, like that boat's going through the water and leaving that wake, I'm filling in that gap without hitting anybody, apologizing. Sorry, excuse us, emergency, we got to get through, you know, just because, like, dude, I can't stop him, and somebody's going to beat him at some point, but I'm back there, you know, like that guy from Animal House, you know. Well, that was so-and-so, he's damn glad to meet you, seriously. We get to the front row, and I mean, I felt kind of bad because I'm taking advantage of the situation. But here I am at the front row. I'm like, wow, that was a very effective way to get to the front row. And now he doesn't want to be there anymore. You know? He was like, oh, okay. But then all of a sudden, they start playing damn Blue Collar Tweakers. And when he gets to the point of the song where he says, them damn Blue Collar Tweakers are running this here town, I started pogoing. Jumping up and down as high as I could with the beat. So I was landing on the, you know, the downbeat. And because everybody else around me was doing the same thing. And I don't think I caused it, but I felt like I helped contribute. You know, my energy was adding in this particular case, it was adding in exponentially. And we were all just pogoing, and I was like doing this, and I'm looking down, and Bubba's not pogoing. So it's pretty traumatic for him because everybody's doing this, and he's down there just like, ah. So he's like, I'm out of here, and he just takes off running straight back, right into the mosh pit. And I saw him getting thrown around a few times. He eventually, I think, kind of got out, and I don't really remember. I think when I was done with that song and made my way carefully back to where my other friend was and the friends we met up with were, Bubba was gone. He like left us high and dry. We found a ride with somebody. I can't remember who it was, but they had a van. And I mean, it really wasn't that hard to find a ride back. I mean, it was like, hey, who's going to Murfreesboro, you know? And we had a few friends that were kind of there, but they didn't have any room. So they were trying to help establish a ride for us back. So we got back. And that was a great show. That was an absolutely great experience. Every amount of it was just wonderful. So that was, you know, there would be a better Primus show to come, the one in New York City. But at least with this Primus show, like, we got to see the whole show, you know. Wow, so what happened after that? Have to forgive me a little bit. That's a lot of that was just going to see. I'm probably going to forget a bunch of stuff here, but like in the late '90s, just totally running a blank. You know, I don't think I really went out and saw a whole terrible lot apart from what you know, like the ticket stubs that we went over last time. So at some point, I decided that Ozric Tentacles was my favorite band in the whole world, and you know, like in the late '90s. And I finally got to see them live. I want to say this was like the first time I saw them live. Yeah. So the first time I saw them live was the best Ozric Tentacles show that I ever saw. I mentioned, like, there was the two that I saw in New York. There was the one that was the worst show that I saw because their keyboard broke down and they had to improvise, and they just were not able to do that with that particular lineup. I mean, you know, if they had practiced more, like improvising, they would have no problem, but that was like pulling the carpet right out from under their feet. And the second show, it's crazy. I still can't remember much about that show. It must have been awesome. But the first show I can definitely remember, and that was their Spirals in Hyperspace tour. So that was about 2000. Yeah, I think it was pre-2001. Yeah. And, yeah, most definitely. And so this was at Exit in Nashville. So the Exit Inn is a really cool club because they have this glass window that just covers up the entire front side of the building. So you can just see the band. You can just like look right in and see. And it's a really popular kind of strip with all kinds of other spots happening. And it's near Vanderbilt University. So it's a really cool spot. So I had my ticket, showed up a bit early, and there was like maybe 10 people waiting outside to get inside. I was like, oh great, this is going to be one of those shows, huh? And we get inside, and sure enough, it was like 10 people, and they're sitting around, you know. So the band waits for a while. I don't think anybody opened for them. It was just them. And they started playing. I can't remember what song it was. It was probably the Citadel Jam or whatever that was. It's like this really like fast-paced groove that goes into kind of like a roots reggae type kind of thing. So it starts out like really exciting, but then it's like, hey, we're also chill, you know, kind of establishing what the night's going to be like. And the sound was very boxed. It was like, ooh, it didn't sound good. And I was like, maybe it's just because the room's not filled up. But I saw who must have been their sound guy, and it was their sound guy. He was kind of walking around the room. He's like doing that thinking face, you know. And he'd stand over here, just walk over the other side, and he walked back to the mixing console, which is up on stage right, not back here. And he just literally just started turning a few things, and all of a sudden the sound just went shoo, and just the spectrum just spread like stereo spectrum, and you could just kind of hear things going back and forth. It was really, really cool. And then he switched over to the lights. He also ran the light show, the laser light show, whatever you want to call it. They had a huge backdrop behind him, and the projectors would just throw all kinds of psychedelic images back on there that went in time with the music, and so he was controlling what was going on. So he was working the whole night. The guy that was not working the whole night was their keyboard player, however. To this day, I mean, I look back at that show and I'm like, man, that guy was, I mean, so their keyboard player at that time, his name is Seaweed. And I guess Seaweed did not head off on the U.S. tours, or maybe he did half the U.S. tours and quit and went back. I don't know what the story is, but I do remember, like, on a lot of the tours, especially in Europe, Seaweed was there playing keyboards, and Seaweed was one of their best keyboard players. He rivaled Joey, who was their like original keyboard player. I mean, I would love to see like a reunion of Ozric Tentacles with those guys playing together, not in any kind of competitive way, but you know, I think you know, like if they hit it off and liked each other, I think it'd be really, really great. And I can't remember that drummer's name for that tour, but he is one of my favorite drummers. Next to Merv, he's my favorite drummer so far. Second favorite, and then third would be Salius, their latest one. And the only reason Salius is the best drummer that Ozric Tentacles ever had, though. Don't get me wrong, but See, Ozric Tentacles has a little bit of that punk edge, and Salius is just a perfectly trained drummer, and everything he does is like just perfect. And I wish I could play that way, don't get me wrong, but there is like that punk element. That's something too, and that's one thing I really enjoyed about Ozric Tentacles. And that drummer, I can't remember his name, but the drummer on the Spirals in Hyperspace tour, he had that punk element in him, and it was just a really driving energy. That's what I'm saying. It's like he brought a lot of energy to the table, and to bring that energy to the table, you risk breaking your time. That's the problem, is because you start pulling in your humanness into it, and your emotions get into it, and if you're trying to keep time, you want to be like a robot, and that doesn't, it starts to have this. So that energy really translated. There was like, maybe 20 people when I say 10, but not a lot of people. But because of those glass walls at the exit in, behind us, the audience and the band, I turned around and I looked and I saw like one person, this one lady in particular, and next thing I know, she's inside, like just jamming, just like she's never heard of this band before or anything. And by halfway through the show, the place was packed. Now maybe there was a lot of people that just didn't know the show started a little bit earlier, and they were fashionably late, that kind of thing. They had already had their tickets. I don't know. But, a lot of people, it was a good night. It was a really good night. That's the important thing about playing a show, is if you pick a bad night and you don't already have a bunch of people coming to your show, you're not going to get a big draw. But if it's a good night, there's a bunch of people out there and they can see you, there's a good chance you're going to pull them in. And that's what Ozric Tentacles did that night. And they slayed. Oh, that reminds me. Around that time I saw King's X. I also saw King's X there at Exit In. So yeah, some of the other bands I saw Nels Cline. I want to say I saw Scarnella. That's probably wrong. I definitely saw Nels Cline. He's a guitar player with Wilco now. I can't remember who he was playing with, but I definitely saw him. And I did see a bunch of Mike Watt shows. I want to say I saw Mike Watt 3 times, maybe even 4 times, because I had the t-shirts. That was what was so great about the Mike Watt shows, is that at the end of the show, he just had this big garbage bag full of clean t-shirts that he made himself. And they were always just like really, really cool t-shirts, like he put some time into. His artistic ability was good enough, you know what I mean? Like he didn't try to make things awesomely great, but everything was like awesomely detailed. And he had like a lot of cool little tidbits in all of his t-shirts. So it'd be like a weird, like a plane flying. It would be like him and one other dude. And it was called like the Third Men, as a play off of, like the Second Men, or the Minute Men, that kind of thing. So a lot of cool shows along those lines. But back to the keyboard player that was talking about the Ozric Tentacles show. So yeah, this guy was like some dude that they picked up, Ozric Tentacles, and like he was just back there just doing this on the keyboard. Like he wasn't even like, all he had to do was kind of have his hands obscured a little bit so you couldn't see his fingers, and have both hands kind of, maybe with the rhythm a little bit, but he was just kind of sort of doing this. And like at the end of the show, like people were out, like, man, he was like the ladies' man. So he was out there just like, he had all these women around him. So just food for thought, you know what I'm saying? Seriously, food for thought. What is the point of having musicianship if it's just an illusion? And if it's just an illusion, then how do we really break through to fans? You see what I'm saying? Okay, that's a whole nother aside. I'm trying to keep on track here and remember what other shows that I left out that were really important. Oh yeah, one thing I should correct. In the last episode when I said that I saw Mastodon open for Clutch in 98. Yeah, that's clearly wrong. It was when I saw them in 2003. That's when Mastodon opened for Clutch. And that was a raw, untamed Mastodon, which it's kind of pulling me, I think, to kind of getting to where I need to start wrapping up. I did mention that I saw Todd Rundgren, I believe. That was one of the later shows that I saw. Didn't have any ticket stubs for that one. But it got to a point to where, like, man, I got tired of standing on my feet. It got to a point to where I realized that when these shows were over at the end of the night, like, I felt like I'd put in an 8-hour shift at a factory or something. Maybe that's over exaggerating, but you know, I'd sit down and be like, whoa, I need to go soak my feet in something. You know, maybe I could have been more preemptive and proactive and worn some Dr. Scholl's pads in my shoes or something. I don't know, but you get older. We get older. I get older. You get older. We all get older. And the older you get, the less tolerant you become of putting up with this crap at the shows. One of the problems with going to Starwood was the exit. Now this was nuts. Here, you know, it's an outdoor arena. Maybe your outdoor arena that you used to go to back in the day was the same thing. And all these people are all walking back to their cars, which are all parked out in this crazy like lawn area where everybody was corralled in. Kind of corral them out, and there's like blue lights and cops flashing everywhere, and you know that 85% of the people there are drunk. And you know, a few people here and there are getting popped and arrested for whatever infractions, you know, and so forth. It was always very dark, you know, leaving these places. And I think that, you know, I don't want to get a little conspiratorial here, but I think that the powers that be kind of wanted to put a, you know, suppress that a little bit. I can kind of understand why, you know. It's a shame, but it gets a little wild, you know what I mean? So yeah, I got to points where like, just don't even go see concert shows anymore. But I saw Rakim. Remember Eric B and Rakim? I did see Rakim, and that was an interesting show. A little bit decadent because, like, I mean, I never go to these things. This was in Manhattan. It was some expensive club, and we had table service. My boss at the time, the place I was working at, went. One of my coworkers went, and he invited us because, like, you know, he was a big into hip hop, and I was very fortunate to go see this show. But like this table service, I mean, I saw the menu, and it was like you get a bottle of Grey Goose vodka, and it's like $150. You know, and we must have had 3 or 4 of those come to our table. I don't know. I'm very grateful for all of this, but I definitely got drunk. That is one show where, I mean, I was like, oh yeah, I'm drunk. What I remembered though was like, man, there must have been like 20 people performing that night. It wasn't just Rakim, you know, it was like 20 people came up and rapped a few numbers before he did, to the point to where, like, I mean, I didn't know who was who was switching in with what. It was all backing tracks anyways. There was no real musicians. It was cool. I had a great time, partially fueled by the alcohol, of course, but no, it was genuinely a good time. But to the point that when Rakim came out, like, I don't really remember anything that he did. I mean, it was literally like maybe a 3-hour show, and he didn't come on until after 2.5 hours. That's a long time. You know, hey, you got your money's worth, I guess. That's a pretty long show. At some point I saw B.B. King. Speaking of B.B. King's Club, I remember seeing B.B. King. It might have been the Horde Tour. Remember, like, I was talking about the Horde Tour? I want to say that that's when I saw B.B. King. I think that he might have been on the Horde Tour. I'd have to look that up. I was very happy to see B.B. King. That was really, really cool. Who else did I see? I saw R.L. Burnside. Now, that show I do remember. I don't remember the Lee Scratch Perry show. I don't know. I mean, that was probably my first introduction to him, to tell you the truth. But the R.L. Burnside show I do remember because it was just a 3-piece. It was him, another guitar player, and his grandson playing drums. And the drums were like up on this huge riser, like way higher than they were. And they were like down here sitting in chairs. And it was really interesting because you didn't really count. Like the backbeat was very sporadic. Sometimes the backbeat would follow a 3 count. Sometimes it would follow a 2 or a 4 count. So there were a lot of 5s and 7s, but it was all really, you know, like just blues 4/4. It's really hard to describe. And the drums would match the guitars and the kind of singing. So when he would be up, it would be snare drum. When he would be down, it'd be bass drum. Didn't matter when. It was almost random, but it was a total feel thing. And yeah, if I were to try out for the band, I would not get the gig, I don't think. It was a whole different level, playing level of feeling and comping off of somebody else kind of thing, and anticipating what they're going to do next. I can do that pretty well, mind you, but that was like, whoa, that's taking it to a whole nother. That's like the whole night, nothing but that, and that would drive me nuts. I need a little coaster, like, you know, put it on autopilot and just play a backbeat for a little while. Yeah, so darn, I'm trying to think like who else. I know there's a few more shows out there. I wish that I had seen Kraftwerk. I did not get to see Kraftwerk. That would have been awesome. That is one show that I would have liked to have gone to see. But other bands, I'm definitely that David Bowie show that he had to got halfway through, and he had that's when we found out he had cancer. He collapsed during that tour. I can't remember what it was. That's a show that I wish that I had gone to had seen. Definitely wish I had seen Queen one good time back in the day. But most of these bands, see, that's the thing, If it wasn't back in the day, I don't really care to go see some of these bands anymore. Like Steely Dan, I'm sure it'd be great, but no, I'm not really interested. It was kind of weird. So I guess I am kind of a traditionalist in the fact that when Steely Dan, back in the day, they didn't tour. That's all they did was studio albums. So it's kind of cool that they're touring now, but I don't know, it's weird. It's kind of, for me, the magic is gone. And to go see them play, it just wouldn't be very entertaining for me. I listen to the live tracks from their tours and stuff, and I just want to listen to the studio tracks. Pink Floyd is kind of the same way. Having said that, I would like to go see Roger Waters. And that's crazy. I feel like I like David Gilmour better, but I feel like Roger Waters puts on a better show. What are you going to do? The shows that I've seen from DVDs, the performances, Roger Waters puts on a great show. And yeah, I would definitely love to go see it. So I'm giving myself here a couple more seconds to see if I can think of any other bands that I'm forgetting about. Oh yeah, of course. Duh. Meshuggah. Oh man, how could I forget Meshuggah? Now, I'm pretty confused on the exact date when I went to go see them. This had to have been, it wasn't obZen, it was the one after obZen. It wasn't, the one in between obZen and Clockworks. I can't remember right now. It's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't remember what it is. But it was that tour, and it was at the Wiltern in Los Angeles, and I want to say it was 2015. It's probably not correct. I think it was after I left Los Angeles to go live in Portland and work at Nike, and then I came back to Los Angeles to work for AT&T. And I think it was then, and that's when I went to go see them. So that would have put it around, 2015, 2016. So 2015 is probably correct. And it was a great show. The Wiltern was a really, really, really cool club. Is a really cool club. It's moderate size. It's not huge, but it's big enough. Their show, I was kind of sitting far back. There were two mosh pits. There was one down front and then one back where I was. If I think correctly, I'm pretty sure that there was two. There may have only been the one back where I was. But then there was a lot of people back in the VIP section back there. I don't know who those people were. There was a lot of people back there in the VIP section. And I'm thinking to myself, this is the one time when a lot of people in LA could go see this band. So who knows who was back there. And yeah, celebrities. Seriously. Who knows? I've seen... well, I'm going to have to talk about this another time because this guy's name, I always forget this guy's name. And he is, he's a TV actor. He was a movie actor. He's been in all kinds of stuff. I think he was on MacGyver, I think. He was the blonde-headed British kid in To Sir with Love with Sidney Poitier and Lulu, right? I can never remember this guy's name. He's got the coolest name in the world, but it's one of those names where like Philip Seymour Hoffman. I'm surprised I remembered his name just now. Rest in peace. I hope he was a good person. Some of these Hollywood actors were finding out. But at any rate, I did it. I said it. Darn. I couldn't get away without saying it once. At this show, with this guy playing, it was like a small club. Melanie Griffith was there with her son. From Don Johnson's son. So like, yeah, all of these places, you know, I'm going to do an episode on the celebrities that I met when I lived in LA, and the ones that I met when I lived in New York City too. But the Meshuggah show was like, that was a great show. I went with one of my guitar players at the time and his brother. And I remember at the end of the show, there was a mosh pit. Like, the mosh pit got really, really fierce, and I was like kind of being stupid, and then I didn't move. I wanted to keep my position, and I probably should have just capitulated and gave into it and got the hell out of the way. Somebody came at me with their elbow right below my neck, right into my spine. And it's funny I should mention this. I can't believe that I'm actually forgetting that I almost forgot this show, because I actually kind of felt that pain just this morning. You know, getting older, once again, I was probably sleeping wrong, but I don't know that it is related to that incident, but it took me a couple of years before I stopped feeling pain in that area. Maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years, I don't know, quite a while. So that was only 6 years ago, if it was 2015. But man, and I think somebody almost headbutted me too, before that or shortly afterwards. And at some point I started wondering if it was my guitar player that actually elbowed me. All right, YouTube, on that note, we got to wrap it up, so I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. How to use any synthesizer in under 10 seconds. You plug some cables in, you twist these knobs, you press this button, and you tweak these knobs. See, it's real simple.